After 43 years of marriage, my husband texted, "Get out. You're ugly. The divorce papers are in the drawer. I found someone younger and richer than you, but the other woman was my friend just to test his loyalty before I handed him my $200 million empire, after that he regret it. My name is Dorothy. I am 67 years old. I own a textile manufacturing company worth $200 million. I have 43 factories, 3,000 employees, and a small garden in Connecticut where I grow roses every spring. And I want to tell you about the man who tried to throw all of that away and how I made sure he regretted every single word. But to understand what happened at the end, you have to understand the beginning. I met Harold Mercer on a cold Friday evening in October, 1981. I was 24 years old, and I did not want to be at that party. My friend Linda had been calling me for 3 days straight, begging me to come to her cousin's gathering in downtown Boston. I was exhausted. I had been working double shifts at a textile warehouse all week, not as a manager, not as anything impressive. I was counting fabric rolls and writing numbers in a logbook. But I had a plan, and that plan required me to understand every single part of that industry before I owned any piece of it. I almost did not walk through that door. Harold was standing near the window when I came in, tall, dark hair, easy, open smile. The kind of man who takes up space in a room without even trying. He was laughing at something, and when he laughed, his whole face changed warm, genuine, real. He noticed me almost immediately. He walked over with 2 glasses of wine before I even said hello. "You look like someone who doesn't want to be here," he said. "That obvious?" I asked, only to someone who feels the same way. He handed me the glass. Harold Mercer, Dorothy Ellis. We stood in the corner of that apartment for 3 hours while the party went on around us. He told me about his father's hardware business, how he was expected to take it over one day. He seemed proud of it, grounded, like a man who knew exactly who he was. I drove home that night thinking about him. He called the next morning at 9. For the first 2 years, Harold was everything I had ever wanted. He was patient with my ambition, in a way most men were not back then. When I told him I wanted to start my own company one day, he did not laugh. He said, "Tell me how." We would sit at my kitchen table on Sunday mornings, coffee going cold between us, and I would talk through my plans while he listened. Really listened. Remembered details from conversations weeks earlier. "You said the Egyptian cotton markup was better," he would say. "Did you ever contact that supplier in Charleston?" He made me feel like my dreams were not too big, like I was not too much. We got married 2 years after that October evening. 60 people, simple ceremony. I wore my mother's earrings. Harold cried when he saw me at the end of the aisle. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the person I will build my life with. I was not completely wrong. He was that person for a while. The first sign came quietly, the way the first signs always do. About 4 years into our marriage, Harold started coming home late on Thursday nights, once a month, then twice, then every week, without fail. "Drinks with clients," he would say. "Work dinner, just the guys." The excuses were always just believable enough, and Harold had a particular skill, a gift, really for making me feel unreasonable when I asked. He never got angry. He just looked at me with this patient, slightly tired expression, like a teacher whose student keeps asking the same wrong question. "You knew I was in sales when you married me," he said once. "Relationships are built after hours. That's just the reality, Dorothy." And he was not entirely wrong. His job did require socializing, so I had no clean argument, just a feeling I could not put into words. I pushed it away. I had a company to build. What I did not know not yet was that Harold was already becoming a different man. Slowly, quietly, the way a house settles into bad foundation without anyone noticing until a wall finally cracks. That crack was coming. I just did not know how big it would be. By the time our son Daniel turned 5 and our daughter Claire was 3, I had stopped asking Harold where he had been. Not because I trusted him completely, but because I had learned that asking cost me more than it gave me. Every question ended the same way: Harold's patient look, Harold's reasonable explanation, Dorothy feeling small for doubting him. It was easier to focus on what I could control. And what I could control was my work. In 1991, I signed the lease on my first small factory. 24 employees. One contract with a regional clothing brand that barely paid the bills. Harold came to the opening day. He stood in the middle of that factory floor, looking around at the machines and the workers and the noise of it all, and he said, "You actually did it." He was proud that day, genuinely proud. I held on to that. For years, I held on to the good moments and let the bad ones slide past. That is what you do in a long marriage. You make a choice, again and again, to see the person you fell in love with rather than the person standing in front of you. But there were incidents that were hard to unsee. The first one happened in 1994, our 13th wedding anniversary. I had made a reservation at a restaurant in downtown Boston, the same city where we had met. I had arranged for Daniel and Claire to stay with Harold's sister. I bought a new dress. I had been planning it for 3 weeks. Harold came home at midnight. I was still sitting at the kitchen table when he walked in, the dress still on, the reservation long past. I had called the restaurant twice. I had called Harold's office. I had called his friend Rick. Nobody had seen him. "Where were you?" I asked. He set his keys on the counter and turned around slowly. And for just 1 second, one unguarded second, I saw something cross his face. Not guilt. Something worse. Inconvenience. Like my sitting there in my anniversary dress waiting for him was a problem he now had to deal with. "Lost track of time," he said. "I'm sorry." That was it. No real explanation. No anger from him. No breakdown from me. Just sorry. Lost track of time. Let's go to bed. I changed out of my dress alone in the bathroom. I folded it carefully and put it back in the bag. I never wore it again. That was the night something shifted in me. Not enough to leave, not enough to even say out loud. But the shift happened. A quiet decision made somewhere deep and private. I will never fully trust this man again. I will love him. I will stay. But I will protect myself. Over the years, there were other incidents. A woman named Tricia, who worked at a bar, Harold's Crowd, frequented a place called Callaway's on 5th. One of Harold's colleagues, a man named Pete, made a comment in passing once that I never forgot. "Tell Harold to be careful at Callaway's. Too many industry people go there." He said it casually, like it was nothing. But I saw something in his eyes that was not nothing. I asked Harold about Tricia that evening. He looked me straight in the eye. "She's a bartender, Dorothy. I know her name because she pours my drink twice a week. Is that not allowed?" So simple, so calm, so utterly reasonable. I had nothing solid to push back with. Just a feeling. Then there was the money. Harold's hardware business had been struggling for years. I knew it was not doing well. What I did not know was the full picture. I found out in small pieces, over time, the way you find water damage in a wall, a stain here, a soft spot there, until one day you push on it and your hand goes straight through. Small transfers from our joint account. 50,000 here, 30,000 there. Harold would explain each one separately, with a reasonable-sounding story. Just bridging a gap until a payment clears. A supplier needed a deposit. I believed him, or I chose to. I was focused on building something that was beginning to grow faster than I had imagined. I told myself Harold's business problems were temporary. I told myself the late nights were just how he was wired. I told myself every marriage has things you look past. I was not wrong about any of that. I was just wrong about how far past the line he had already gone. Let me tell you about the company, not because I want to brag, but because you need to understand what Harold was standing next to for 43 years, and what he was planning to walk away with. I started Ellis Textile Group in 1989 with a single factory, 22 employees, and 1 contract. The first 3 years were brutal. I worked 16-hour days. I took no salary for the first 18 months. Harold's income from the hardware business kept our household running, and I am honest enough to say that without that, the early years would have been even harder. But I built it. Every decision, every supplier relationship, every expansion. Me. By 1995, I had 4 factories and 200 employees. By 2001, 12 factories and 800 employees. By 2010, 28 factories. By 2020, when I turned 63, Ellis Textile Group had 43 factories across 6 states, 3,200 employees, and an annual revenue that put us on regional business lists I had never expected to be on. The company was worth $200 million. I am telling you this because Harold knew every number. He watched it grow from a rented factory floor to an empire. He attended the anniversary galas. He shook hands with my board members. He sat at the head table at the company's 30th anniversary dinner. He called himself my partner. And in 2022, when I turned 65 and started thinking about the next chapter of my life, I had a conversation with my corporate attorney, James Whitfield, that would change everything. I want to give Harold co-ownership, I told James. Formally, on paper. He has been with me through all of it. He deserves to share in what this became. James was quiet for a moment. Dorothy, are you sure about this? He is my husband, I said. 43 years. Of course I am sure. James began preparing the documents. A 40% stake in Ellis Textile Group. At current valuation, that was $80 million. Harold did not know about any of it. I was planning it as a surprise. A gesture of love after 4 decades. A way of saying, I see you. I see what you gave up. I want you to have this. But something stopped me before I told him. It was a Thursday evening, in late March 2022. Harold came home late, which was nothing new. But that night, something was different. He was not just distracted. He was almost cheerful in a way that felt wrong, like a man who had just gotten very good news he could not tell you about. He kissed me on the cheek, said he wasn't hungry, and went straight to his study. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment. That feeling came back. The one from our 13th anniversary. The one I had learned to recognize over 40 years. Quiet, low, impossible to shake. I did not confront him. I had learned long ago that confronting Harold without evidence was useless. He was too good at explaining, too calm under pressure, too skilled at making my instincts look like paranoia. Instead, I went to my own study, closed the door, and sat down at my desk. I thought about the $80 million sitting in a document on James's desk, waiting to be signed over. I thought about the late nights, and the bar, and Tricia and Pete's sideways comment, and the anniversary dress I had folded alone in the bathroom. I thought about all the years I had chosen to look past things I should have looked at directly, and I made a decision. Before I gave Harold anything, before I signed a single page, I was going to find out exactly who I was giving it to. I picked up my phone and called my oldest friend, Sandra. She had known Harold almost as long as I had. She was sharp, careful, and the kind of woman who could walk into a room and read every person in it within 5 minutes. She was also someone Harold had always liked and trusted. She picked up on the second ring. "Sandra," I said, "I need a favor, a big one, and I need you to keep it completely between us." There was a pause. "Tell me what you need," she said, and I told her everything. "I want to be clear about something." What I asked Sandra to do was not about revenge. Not at that point. I was not trying to trap Harold or destroy him. I simply needed the truth before I made a decision that would affect everything I had spent my entire life building. Sandra understood that immediately. She agreed to get close to Harold, to let him think she had developed feelings for him, to see how far he would go. She would report back to me everything, every conversation, every suggestion, every word he said about our marriage and about me. "Are you sure you want to know?" Sandra asked me that night on the phone. "I have to know," I said. "Before I give him $80 million, I have to know exactly who he is." "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll do it." What happened over the next 3 months was worse than I had imagined. Sandra started running into Harold at the places he went. His regular bar, a coffee shop near his office, a restaurant he liked on Friday afternoons. It did not take long. Harold had always found Sandra attractive. I had noticed it over the years and chosen to overlook it. He warmed up to her quickly. Within 6 weeks, they were having regular conversations, meeting for coffee. Harold was careful at first, appropriate, but Sandra was patient. She let him talk. She listened the way I had listened to him in the early years, and Harold, being Harold, responded to that attention like a plant responding to water. The first truly alarming thing Sandra told me was about money. "He talked about your company for almost an hour last Tuesday," she told me. "He knows everything about it, Dorothy. Valuations, board members, contracts. He talked about it like he already owns half of it." My stomach tightened. What exactly did he say? He said, and I am telling you his exact words, that once the divorce is finalized, his lawyer would argue for a 50% stake in Ellis Textile Group on the grounds of a 43-year marriage and his early financial contribution. He said he has receipts for every dollar he ever put into your household in the early years. I sat down slowly. Harold had been building a legal case, quietly. For how long I did not know. "There's more," Sandra said. The more was this. Harold had been meeting with a divorce attorney for at least 6 months. He had a strategy. First, he would send me papers. He would make the process seem friendly and simple. He would offer me a comfortable settlement, which, in his words, meant enough for me to live on, without being embarrassing. Then, his attorney would argue that his 43 years of marriage and early financial support entitled him to a significant share of the company. He was not just leaving me. He was planning to take my company. Sandra told me all of this over 3 separate conversations, always careful, always precise. She recorded nothing I had not asked her to, and it would not have been right, but she remembered everything, every detail, every word Harold had said while he thought he was flirting with my best friend. The last thing she told me before the text arrived was this. "He asked me to go to Portugal with him," Sandra said. Her voice was flat. "After the divorce settles, he already has an apartment picked out. He said he would have plenty of money by then." I was quiet for a long time. "Did he say anything about me?" I asked. Sandra hesitated. "Dorothy, tell me." "He said you were past your prime, that you had let yourself go, that the woman he married was ambitious and exciting, and that person was gone a long time ago." I looked out the window at my garden. The roses were blooming. I had planted those myself 20 years ago, and I had tended them every single spring without help from anyone. "Okay," I said. "Are you all right?" "Yes," I said. "Thank you, Sandra. You can stop now. I have everything I need. I hung up and sat in my chair for a very long time. Not angry, not crying, just still. The next morning, Harold sent me that text. It was a Tuesday morning in September. I had woken up early, the way I always do, made a pot of strong coffee, sat at the kitchen table with the newspaper, a habit I had kept since I was 30 years old. The house was quiet. Harold had already left for his office. My phone buzzed on the table. I looked at the screen. Harold's name. I picked it up. Dorothy. I've made a decision. I want a divorce. The papers are already drawn up. They're in the top drawer of my desk in the study. I've spoken to my attorney, and this is the best path for both of us. I've met someone. She is younger. She appreciates me in ways that have been missing from this marriage for a long time. Honestly, Dorothy, you've let yourself go. You stopped trying years ago. I don't say this to be cruel. I say it because you deserve the truth. Sign the papers quietly, and I will make sure you are comfortable. Don't make this ugly. I read it once. I set the phone face down on the table. I sat very still and looked at the garden through the kitchen window, the roses, the oak tree Harold had promised to trim every spring and never did, the stone path I had laid myself the summer Daniel went to college. 43 years. A text message. He had not even called. He had not sat across from me at the table where we had eaten dinner together for 4 decades. He had not looked me in the eye. He had sent a text, like a message to a plumber about a leaking pipe, a problem to be managed, a thing to be handled. You've let yourself go. I thought about the warehouse in 1981, the second-hand desk, the $400, the 16-hour days, and the factories, and the 3,000 people who worked for me. I thought about every decision I had made alone, because Harold was not interested in the details. I thought about our daughter Claire's birth. Harold had been at a work event and almost missed it. I thought about Daniel's college graduation and how Harold had spent the entire dinner afterward on his phone. I thought about Sandra's voice on the phone. He said, "You were past your prime." I did not cry. I am telling you this honestly. I did not cry that morning. I think I had been preparing for this moment without fully realizing it. Sandra's report over those 3 months had slowly done something to my grief, processed it early. So when the text came, there was no shock left, only clarity. I finished my coffee. I went to Harold's study. I opened the drawer. The papers were there, just as he had said. 12 pages. I flipped through them slowly. Harold's attorney was a man named Gerald Fowler. I recognized the firm name from a business context years ago. Good firm. Expensive. Harold had clearly been planning this for a while. The papers were structured exactly as Sandra had described. They offered me a monthly living allowance. They proposed a mutual agreement on shared assets. There was no mention of Ellis Textile Group by name, but there was a clause about marital contributions to jointly developed wealth that I recognized immediately for what it was. A door Harold was planning to walk through. I put the papers back in the drawer, exactly as I had found them. I went back to the kitchen and called James Whitfield. "James," I said when he picked up, "cancel the ownership transfer documents. Lock them. Don't touch anything until you hear from me. Dorothy, what happened?" "Harold sent me divorce papers this morning." A long pause. "I'm sorry. Are you—" "I'm fine. But I need you to do something else. I need you to go through every joint account we have, every single transfer Harold has made in the past 5 years, every dollar, and James I. Need the name of the best divorce attorney in Connecticut. That would be Patricia Holt," he said, without hesitation. "Set up a meeting with her. This week." "I will. Dorothy, one more thing." I looked at Harold's text, still sitting on my screen. "Do not tell anyone about any of this. Not a word." I put the phone down. Harold had texted me at 7:42 in the morning. By 9 o'clock, I had already begun. James Whitfield had been my corporate attorney for 19 years. He was a careful man, methodical, not the kind of person who alarmed easily. So when he called me back 2 days after I had asked him to look through the joint accounts, and his voice had that particular flatness that careful men get when they have found something they did not want to find, I knew, before he said a word, that it was bad. "Dorothy," he said, "I need you to come in. Tell me now." A pause. "I'd really rather do this in person." "James, tell me now." He told me. Over the past 5 years, Harold had made a total of 61 separate transfers from our joint accounts. The smallest was $12,000. The largest was $140,000. The total, when James added every single transaction, was $873,000. Nearly $900,000. Gone. Where did it go? I asked. My voice was completely steady. I was sitting in my kitchen, and I remember noticing that the morning light was very bright on the table. Most of it went into the hardware business. He was bleeding money, Dorothy. The business has been insolvent for at least 3 years. But that's not all of it. James paused. About $220,000 went to a separate account. Personal, not the business. I traced it to a savings account in Harold's name only, opened 18 months ago. I closed my eyes. He was building a nest egg, I said. It looks that way. 4. Portugal. Another pause. I'm sorry. Nothing. Keep going. The transfers were structured carefully, never large enough, individually, to trigger an automatic flag. But taken together, this is a clear pattern. Dorothy, I have to be direct with you. What Harold has done may constitute financial misconduct within the marriage. In Connecticut, dissipation of marital assets is taken very seriously in divorce proceedings. I sat with that for a moment. Dissipation of marital assets. Such a clean, legal phrase for what it actually was. He had been stealing from me. Not dramatically, not all at once. Slowly, carefully, in amounts just small enough that I would not look too closely, using my trust as cover. Set up the meeting with Patricia Holt, I said. It's already scheduled. Thursday at 2. Good. And James, I want everything documented. Every transfer, every amount, every date. Organized and clear. I want to walk into Patricia's office with a complete picture. I'll have it ready. I hung up and sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time. Harold had texted me 4 days earlier. I had still not replied. He had sent a follow-up message 2 days ago, cheerful, almost relaxed. Have you had a chance to look at the papers? No rush, but the sooner we get this moving, the better for both of us. I had not answered that one either. Every day I did not answer. I could feel his confidence growing. He thought my silence was defeat. He thought I was the woman he had described to Sandra, past her prime, past her fight, ready to sign quietly and disappear. I almost wanted to feel something like satisfaction about how wrong he was. But the truth is, I did not feel much of anything yet. I was still in the phase I always entered, when something big was happening, focused, calm, executing one step at a time. The same way I had approached every difficult business problem for 40 years. Identify the situation, gather information, build the strategy, move. Do not let emotion make you sloppy. I thought about Harold somewhere across town, probably having dinner with the woman he believed was Sandra, probably talking about Portugal, probably telling her how smoothly everything was going. I thought about the $80 million that had almost been his, that I had come within a single signature of giving away to a man who was simultaneously planning to steal from me and leave me. And for just a moment, sitting in that bright kitchen, I let myself feel it. Not anger, not sadness. Gratitude. Gratitude for the feeling that had stopped me. For the instinct I had listened to after 4 decades of learning to ignore it. For Sandra. For James. For every quiet year of watching and learning and building and protecting, even when I had not known exactly what I was protecting against. Thursday at 2, I would meet Patricia Holt, and everything was about to change. Before we go any further, where are you listening from right now? Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far Dorothy's story has traveled. And if you haven't already, please like this. It helps more people find this story who might really need to hear it. Now, let's keep going. Patricia Holt's office was on the 14th floor of a building in Hartford. I had done my research before Thursday. Patricia was 58 years old. She had practiced family law for 30 years. She had handled 17 cases involving contested business ownership in divorce proceedings. She had won 15 of them. Her clients called her Pat. Her opponents called her something else. I arrived 12 minutes early. I sat in the waiting room with a straight back and my hands folded in my lap, the way my mother had taught me to sit when I needed people to understand that I was not afraid. Patricia Holt walked out to greet me herself. She was shorter than I expected. Dark blazer. No jewelry except small gold earrings. Eyes that assessed you in the first 2 seconds and filed the information away permanently. "Mrs. Mercer," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Dorothy," I said. "Please." We sat across from each other, at her conference table. James had sent everything over the previous afternoon, all 61 transactions, organized by date and amount, with the total clearly noted at the bottom. Patricia read through it without speaking for several minutes. Then she looked up. "Your husband's attorney is Gerald Fowler," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, Gerald is good," she said. "But he has a pattern. He always moves quickly in the first 60 days. Lots of paperwork, lots of deadlines, designed to overwhelm. He's counting on you to feel pressured." She paused. "We're not going to feel pressured." "Agreed. Tell me about the company." I told her everything. The founding, the growth, the current valuation, the ownership structure entirely in my name, as it had always been, because I had never had a reason to put Harold on it. "Has Harold ever had a formal role in the company?" Patricia asked. "No." "Has he ever attended board meetings, signed documents on behalf of the company, or been introduced formally as an owner or officer?" "No." "Good." She made a note. "His attorney will argue marital contribution that Harold's early financial support of your household allowed you to build the company. It is a legitimate argument in Connecticut." My jaw tightened. "How legitimate?" "Enough to pursue, not enough to win." She looked at me directly. "Dorothy, I want to be completely honest with you. If you had signed those papers, you would have walked into a negotiation from a position of weakness. Harold's team would have used the marital contribution argument to chip away at what you were owed. You would have gotten far less than half the marital assets, and Ellis Textile Group would have been subject to dispute." "But I didn't sign," I said. "No," she said, "you didn't. And what James found changes everything. The dissipation of marital assets, nearly $900,000 moved without my knowledge or consent, fundamentally shifted the legal position. In Connecticut, a spouse who removes or misuses marital funds before or during divorce proceedings faces serious consequences in the final settlement. It is not a minor issue. It is the kind of thing that makes judges angry. "We are going to file first," Patricia said. "We file, we document the dissipation, and we put Gerald Fowler on the defensive from day one. Harold walks in expecting to control this process. We're going to take that control away before he even sits down." I looked at her for a moment. "There's something else," I said. I told her about the $80 million I had almost signed over. The ownership transfer James had prepared, and then cancelled. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "Harold knew about the transfer?" she asked. "He did not know the exact amount, but he knew I had been considering it. And how did he know? I thought about Harold's cheerful tone, his confidence, his certainty that this would all go smoothly. "I'm not sure," I said slowly. Patricia leaned forward. "Dorothy, is it possible someone told him? Someone inside your circle who knew about the transfer?" The question landed quietly. I sat with it, and then, slowly, something cold moved through me. Because there was only one person outside of James's office who had known I was considering that transfer, and her name was Sandra. I drove home from Patricia's office in silence. No music, no phone calls. Just the road and the thought that I could not stop turning over. Sandra had known about the ownership transfer. I had told her myself months ago before I had asked her to get close to Harold. It had been part of my explanation of why I needed to know the truth before I signed anything. I had trusted her with that information because she was my oldest friend, because I had known her for 31 years, because she had been at my wedding, at my mother's funeral, at the hospital the night Daniel was born. She was the closest thing to a sister I had ever had. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for 10 minutes. The question was not whether she had told Harold. The question was why, and how much, and when. I called her that evening. Sandra answered on the third ring. Her voice was warm, familiar. "Dorothy, how are you holding up?" "Fine," I said. "I had a meeting with my attorney today." "Good, good. Patricia Holt?" "Yes." I paused. "Sandra, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be honest with me." A beat of silence. Very brief. Almost nothing. But I had known this woman for 31 years, and I caught it. "Of course," she said. "Did you tell Harold about the ownership transfer?" The silence this time was longer. "Dorothy, yes or no?" A long exhale. "It wasn't I didn't tell him the details. I just mentioned that you were considering something big. I thought it would help. I thought if he knew what he was risking, he might." "Sandra, I'm sorry." Her voice cracked slightly. "I thought he would reconsider. I thought knowing about it would make him realize what he was about to lose and he would stop all of this." I sat very still. "When did you tell him?" "About 2 months ago. Before the text. I know that doesn't help." 2 months ago, I repeated. So Harold knew I was about to sign over $80 million to him. He knew that was on the table, and he sent me a divorce text anyway. Sandra said nothing, and I understood then fully, completely, what Harold had actually been planning. He had not been planning to stay and receive the ownership transfer honestly. He had been planning to accelerate the divorce, get his settlement, file a legal claim on the company using the marital contribution argument, and still walk away with as much as possible. He wanted more than what I was offering. He had decided to take it by force. "I am not angry with you," I told Sandra, and I meant it. "You made a mistake because you were trying to help. But Sandra, I need you to understand something. What you just told me may actually matter in court." Harold knew about a potential asset transfer. He accelerated his divorce timeline immediately after finding out. That shows intent, planning. It makes what he did even worse, legally. "Dorothy, I'm so sorry." "I know." I took a breath. "I need you to be willing to give a written statement to my attorney about everything. What Harold told you, when he told you, all of it." A pause. "Yes, of course, whatever you need. Thank you." I hung up and called Patricia immediately. When I told her what Sandra had just shared, Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then I heard her pen moving. "This is actually significant," she said. "Harold knew about a pending asset transfer and chose to file for divorce rather than disclose it or discuss it. That demonstrates intentional financial maneuvering. Combined with the dissipation we already have Dorothy, his position just got considerably weaker." "Good," I said. How are you feeling? Patricia asked. It was an unusual question from an attorney in the middle of a strategy call. I appreciated it. I feel, I said carefully, like I have been awake for 43 years, and I am finally beginning to see clearly. Patricia was quiet for a second. Then, good. Keep seeing clearly. I'll file on Monday. I went to bed that night knowing 3 things. Harold had underestimated me. Sandra had made a mistake, but was willing to fix it. And on Monday morning, Harold Mercer was going to wake up and find out that the papers in his desk drawer were no longer the only papers that mattered. Patricia filed on Monday morning at 9:15. I was in my office at Ellis Textile Group when James called to confirm it was done. I was sitting at my desk, by the window, the same window I had looked out of on the day we hit our first 10 million in revenue. I remember feeling something very specific in that moment when James called. Not triumph, not relief. Readiness. Harold received formal notification that afternoon through Gerald Fowler's office. Patricia had told me what to expect. Fowler would call her, probably that same day, to schedule a preliminary conversation. He would be controlled, professional, slightly aggressive. He would hint at the company claim early to see how she reacted. It was his standard approach. He called at 4:17. Patricia called me at 4:45. Fowler is rattled, she said, and I could hear the precision in her voice. He didn't expect us to file first, and he definitely didn't expect the dissipation documentation. He tried to brush past it, called it a mischaracterization of routine financial management. I told him we had 61 transactions with dates, amounts, and destinations, and that we were fully prepared to present them. How did he respond? He asked for a 2-week extension before any formal proceedings, to review the documentation. I smiled. He needs 2 weeks to figure out how bad it is. Exactly, Patricia said. We gave him 1 week. Over the following days, the house was very quiet. Harold and I were still living under the same roof, something I had chosen deliberately on Patricia's advice. Leaving the house could be used against me legally. So I stayed, and Harold stayed, and we moved through our home like 2 planets in separate orbits. He barely spoke to me. When he did, his tone had changed. The confidence that had been in every text, every casual shrug over the past months, it was thinner now. He had spoken to Fowler. He knew something had shifted, even if he did not yet know how much. One morning he came into the kitchen while I was having breakfast. I don't understand why you're making this complicated, he said. He was trying to sound calm. He was not calm. I looked up from my newspaper. I'm not making anything complicated, Harold. I'm making it accurate. Fowler says you're claiming I stole money. His voice was tight. That's not what happened. What did happen? He opened his mouth, closed it. You were going to give me the company anyway, he said finally, and his voice had dropped, almost quiet. You were going to put me on it. I moved some things around ahead of that. It was going to balance out. I set down my newspaper. I looked at him across the table. This man I had loved for 43 years, who had cried at our wedding, who had handed me a glass of wine at a party in Boston in 1981, and made me laugh. Harold, I said. The transfer I was considering was a gift. It was going to be my choice, on my terms, freely given because I loved you. What you did was take money from accounts I trusted you with. Those are 2 very different things. He said nothing. You should talk to Fowler, I said. I picked up my newspaper again. Harold stood there for another moment, then walked out of the kitchen. I heard the front door close a minute later. He did not come home that night. The next morning, Patricia called me with news I had not expected. Gerald Fowler had made an offer, a settlement offer, without going to formal proceedings. Harold was willing to accept a clean separation. No claim on Ellis Textile Group, no contested business assets. In exchange, He wanted his personal savings account, the hardware business in full, and a 5-year monthly payment. Patricia explained the numbers. I listened carefully. "He's backing down from the company," I said when she finished. "He is," Patricia said. "The dissipation documentation scared them. If this goes to a judge, Harold doesn't just lose, he potentially faces additional consequences. Fowler knows that." I was quiet for a moment. "What is your recommendation?" I asked. "I think we can do better than what he's offering," she said. "But I want you to decide how far you want to take this." I thought about $900,000. I thought about Portugal. I thought about the text message and the anniversary dinner and 30 years of late nights and excuses. "Further," I said, "we're getting close to the part Harold never saw coming. Before we get there, what city are you in right now? Drop it in the comments. And if this story is making you feel something, please share it. You never know who needs to hear that it's never too late to protect yourself. Now, let's finish this." Here is what Harold did not know. While he was building his case for the past year, quietly speaking to Fowler, moving money, planning Portugal, I had been running my company. And in running my company, I had continued doing something I had done for 40 years, paying attention to details other people overlooked. In the spring of 2021, a year before Harold began his divorce planning, I had made a business decision that seemed unrelated to any of this. I had retained a financial forensics firm, Keaton Analytics, based in New York, to do a full review of Ellis Textile Group's internal accounts. Standard practice for a company our size. Clean the books, find inefficiencies, make sure everything is in order. During that review, one of the Keaton analysts flagged something unusual. There were 3 invoices in our accounts payable system from a supplier called Harwick Industrial Supply. Total value, $412,000 over 18 months. The invoices were legitimate on the surface: supplies, equipment maintenance, materials. They had been approved and paid, but Harwick Industrial Supply did not exist. It had been created 14 months prior. It had no physical address, no employees, no history. It was a shell. I had sat with that information very quietly for several months. Our internal investigation traced the invoices to an approval pathway that ran through a mid-level operations manager named Carl Briggs. Carl had worked for Ellis Textile Group for 11 years. He had a clean record. He was well liked. He was also Harold's college roommate. I had never connected them. Harold had never mentioned Carl worked for me. Carl had never mentioned knowing Harold. For 11 years, they had both been in my life, separated by a wall that I now realized Harold had deliberately maintained. I had kept this information in a secure file. I had not yet decided what to do with it. The amounts were significant, but not catastrophic for a company our size, and I had wanted to understand the full picture before I acted. Now I understood the full picture. Harold had been using a contact inside my own company to siphon money. The $900,000 from the joint accounts that was Harold taking from our shared life. But the $400,000 from Ellis Textile Group through Carl Briggs, that was Harold stealing from my business. Directly, from the company I had built with my entire life. I called Patricia that evening and told her everything. There was a very long silence on her end of the phone. "Dorothy," she said slowly, "this is no longer just a divorce case. I know. This is potential fraud. Corporate fraud. If Harold directed Briggs to create false invoices and siphon funds from Ellis Textile Group, that is a criminal matter." "I know," I said again. "Do you want to pursue it that way?" I thought about Harold standing in my kitchen that morning. You were going to give me the company anyway. It was going to balance out. He had genuinely believed that. He had looked me in the eye and said it with the complete confidence of a man who had never truly respected what the company was or what it cost me to build it. He thought it was his already. He had always thought it was partly his, and when he had decided to leave, he had simply started taking it early. "Yes," I said. "I want to pursue it." Patricia was quiet for one more moment. "This changes everything about the settlement negotiation," she said. "Fowler made an offer yesterday because he thought the dissipation case was the worst of it. He doesn't know about Keaton's findings. He doesn't know about Carl Briggs." "No," I said, "he doesn't. If we bring this forward, Harold is not just looking at losing the settlement negotiation. He is looking at potential criminal charges." "I understand." "Dorothy." Patricia's voice was careful. "Are you prepared for what that means? For your children? For the public nature of it? For Harold personally?" I sat very still in my chair. I thought about 43 years. I thought about Daniel and Claire, who deserved the truth about their father more than they deserved a comfortable lie. I thought about 3,000 employees, whose livelihoods depended on the integrity of a company I had promised to protect. "He stole from my company," I said. "From the people who work for me. Yes, I am prepared." "All right," Patricia said. "Call me in the morning," I said. "We have work to do." It was a Wednesday morning in November. I was in my kitchen, the same table, the same garden outside the window when the front doorbell rang at 9 o'clock. I opened the door. Patricia Holt was standing on the front step. Behind her was James Whitfield, and next to James was a man I did not recognize, mid-50s, dark coat, calm expression. "Dorothy," Patricia said, "may we come in?" "Of course." The man in the dark coat introduced himself as he stepped inside. His name was Robert Caldwell. He was a senior investigator with the Connecticut State Financial Crimes Unit. Harold was upstairs. I had heard him moving around about 20 minutes earlier. We sat in the living room. Caldwell explained, briefly and precisely, that based on the documentation provided by Patricia and James, the state had opened a formal investigation into potential wire fraud and corporate asset misappropriation connected to the false invoices run through Harwick Industrial Supply. "Is Harold Mercer here?" Caldwell asked. "He is," I said. "We'll need to speak with him." I called upstairs. "Harold, can you come down, please?" A pause. Footsteps on the stairs. Harold came into the living room in his morning clothes, shirt untucked, cup of coffee in his hand. He stopped when he saw the people sitting in his living room. His eyes moved from Patricia to James, to Caldwell to me. "What is this?" he said. Caldwell stood. He introduced himself. He told Harold that he was there regarding an investigation into financial transactions connected to Ellis Textile Group. I watched Harold's face. I had expected anger. I had prepared myself for a blow-up for Harold to shout, to deny, to turn on me with everything he had. That is not what happened. What happened was that Harold sat down, very slowly, in the armchair by the window, like a man whose legs had simply stopped working. He set his coffee cup on the side table with a small, careful click, and he looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at me. I had been waiting, I think, to feel something in that moment, some version of satisfaction, or grief, or anger, the full weight of 43 years arriving all at once. But what I felt was much simpler than any of those things. I felt finished, not finished in a broken way, finished the way a long project is finished. The way a building is finished when the last stone is set and it is finally complete, and it will stand on its own now, without you holding it up. I had been holding this up for a very long time, and now I could put it down. Harold answered Caldwell's questions in a voice that was almost unrecognizable. Quiet, careful. The confidence was gone completely. Carl Briggs had already been interviewed 2 days earlier. Briggs had cooperated fully, immediately. He had provided everything: dates, amounts, instructions Harold had given him. Apparently it had not taken long. Briggs had no intention of protecting Harold once he realized the scope of what was happening. The interview lasted 40 minutes. When Caldwell stood to leave, he told Harold he was not to leave the state, and that formal charges were likely pending review. He would be in contact through his attorney. Harold nodded. Caldwell and James left together. Patricia stayed for another 10 minutes to go over next steps with me. Then she left as well. And then it was just Harold and me in the living room. He sat in the armchair. I stood near the door. "I didn't think you would actually do this," he said. His voice was very quiet. "I know you didn't. The company Dorothy. I wasn't trying to—" He stopped, started again. "I always thought of it as ours. I know it was in your name, but I always thought of us as a team." I looked at him for a long moment. "A team," I said. "Harold, you moved $900,000 out of our accounts without telling me. You created fake invoices inside my company. You planned to divorce me by text and go to Portugal." I paused. "When exactly were we a team?" He had no answer. I picked up my coat from the chair by the door. "I have a board meeting this morning," I said, and I walked out. The formal charges came 6 weeks later. Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Harold was charged on both counts. His attorney, Gerald Fowler, had withdrawn from the case almost immediately. Harold could no longer afford him, was a public defender who was doing his best under difficult circumstances. The divorce proceedings and the criminal case ran parallel tracks for the better part of a year. On the divorce side, Patricia was precise and relentless. The final settlement gave me the full marital home, all shared financial accounts, and full ownership of every asset in my name, which was everything that mattered. Harold received the hardware business, which was essentially worthless by that point, and a modest sum that Patricia had agreed to include on the condition that Harold sign a complete waiver of any future claim against Ellis Textile Group. He signed. He had no choice. On the criminal side, Harold pled guilty to the wire fraud charge in exchange for a reduced sentence on the conspiracy count. The judge, a woman in her 60s, who read the full case summary before sentencing and asked several pointed questions about the duration of the scheme, sentenced Harold to 26 months. He served 18, released on good behavior. Carl Briggs cooperated fully and received probation and community service. He had a family. I had no interest in destroying him. He had made a terrible choice at Harold's direction, and he had owned it immediately. I respected that, even under the circumstances. I sold the marital home 6 months after the proceedings concluded. I had lived in that house for 22 years. I had painted every room. I had planted the garden. I had laid the stone path. And I walked away from it without looking back, because a house is just a structure, and what makes it a home is the people in it and what passes between them. The people in that house had been living a fiction for a long time. I bought a smaller property, a house with a large garden and a view of the water, and a study with a window big enough to let the afternoon light come all the way across the floor. I planted roses in the new garden, different colors this time. I chose them myself from a nursery on a Saturday morning in April, standing in the sun with dirt on my gloves, and I felt something I had almost forgotten was available to me: peace. Ellis Textile Group continued to grow. In the year following the divorce, we signed 2 new regional contracts and opened a 44th factory. I promoted 3 women to senior leadership positions. I gave a small speech at the company's 35th anniversary gala, and I stood at the podium and looked out at 3,000 people whose jobs I had helped protect, and I meant every word of it. My children were complicated, as children are in these situations. Daniel took time. He had loved his father in the uncomplicated way that sons sometimes do, and finding out who Harold really was cost him something. We talked, many times. Long conversations over meals, and on the phone. I told him the truth, all of it, because he was old enough and strong enough to hold it, and because he deserved the real story of his own family. Claire had known or suspected more than she had ever said. When I told her what had happened, she cried for a while and then said, very quietly, "I'm proud of you, Mom." 3 words that meant more than I can explain. Harold called me once, about a year after his release. I answered. He said he was sorry. He said it carefully, in a way that I could tell he had rehearsed. He listed things he regretted. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "I accept your apology, Harold." Because I did. Not for him, for myself. Carrying anger is heavy, and I had been carrying heavy things for a long time. "Are you well?" he asked. "I am very well," I said. "I'm glad." A pause. "I hope you know I always—" "Harold," I said gently, "take care of yourself." I hung up. I went back to my garden. The roses I had planted in spring were in full bloom, red and white and a deep orange that looked almost gold in the afternoon sun. I stood there in the quiet for a moment, looking at what I had grown. Then I went inside and made a pot of coffee, and I sat at my own table, in my own house, in my own life, and I was completely, entirely at peace. If Dorothy's story stayed with you, please share it. Someone out there is sitting at a kitchen table right now feeling like it's too late to stand up for themselves. Show them it isn't. Drop your city in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're hearing this. And thank you for being here until the very last word.